We'll get back into what I was talking about here. We'll go back in for the final clip of the Howard Stern show when the serial killer called in. Then we'll wrap things up with some information I have of the post of that. Alrighty, let me find it here.
Sometimes I ask them if they think it's dangerous doing what they're doing, if they're worried about things, and they'll laugh it off, and that just pisses me off.
Right. And then you go ahead and you kill him.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go.
Well, now we've shed no light on this. We don't know how a serial killer is made, and we don't know how to catch him.
Yeah, well, you know what? All the experts don't know either, so. Well, here's a guy, just another story. He's out there.
You know, it substantiates my theory. Did you get jealous of Cunanan? Is that why you're talking to us now?
No, actually, I was thinking about writing a musical about Andrew Cunanan, but...
Guy's a comedian, too.
Huh?
Guy's a... Hey, some psychologist is on the line. You want to talk to him?
Sure.
I mean, since you're looking for answers.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, yeah. Robert?
How you doing, Howard?
Hey, man. Go ahead.
Just wondering, how long did this guy wet his bed when he was a young boy?
Are you serious, or are you just trying to make a joke?
No, I'm totally serious.
Did you wet your bed when you were a young boy?
No. Didn't do that at all. No. How about starting fires? Huh? How about starting fires? Sure. Yep.
You did start fires?
Yeah.
How old were you? How old were you when you?
For people to not get into serial killing, to start fires, wet their bed when they're young. Along with the mutilation of little animals, but he said he didn't do that, so.
Right.
That's kind of something that was missing.
But fires was in your history, right?
You could say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it starts off as external ways of showing off their anger, and then they move on and go on to bigger and better things, I guess.
Wonder why this guy kills. Do you have any guess?
I don't know. I think you're right on with something with his family, childhood.
What's he so angry about?
Right.
You know, unfortunately, he's real angry, and he's out there hurting a lot of innocent women.
Yeah, what do I do with a guy like this? Just hang up and forget about it, or is there anything I can...
Depends on, Howard, what are you going to do? Of course, you're not going to, turn him in, but...
Well, I mean, I would, but I can't.
A lot of people would want to turn him in, but what can you do? You talk to him, try and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, all right. That's right. Then I'll probably just hang up. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Howard.
Thanks, man. All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mr. Serial Killer.
You know, I mean...
Want to give us your name?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm not going to get him to turn himself in. I've had calls from people who go, well, why didn't you do something? I go, well, what am I supposed to do? The guy's on the phone.
Crawl through the phone and get him?
Yeah. They were like, well, why don't you trace these calls? And I'm like, well, I don't have that equipment.
Yeah, what are we, the police?
I can't even get a phone system that works for air. Let alone a tracing thing. Oh, Jackie's back there bumming out.
First I wasn't buying it, but now I think I'd buy it.
Nah, I buy it. I bought that guy.
Sort of offhand attitude that you have to be a serial killer.
Nah, I buy it.
When he said Baba Booey, I was hoping he was going to break it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you horse-tooth jackass.
Right.
He snapped right back, you know.
Yeah. No, I think he was the real deal. Tell you the truth. Okay, Tom, you're on the air.
Okay, so we just shared all the footage from when audio, actually not footage, but audio show, Howard Stern show, 1997 on August 13th, when an alleged serial killer called into the show, said his name was Clay. Of course, this is a 17-minute conversation that Howard Stern held. He did a great job going through information and everything, in my opinion, at least. And there was an aftermath of this, right? Of course. So apparently Howard Stern has said that the day after this happened, the FBI came there, took all the tapes and audio stuff to help analyze this. There's a lot of people that are connecting with this with a famous serial killer case. It's called the Storyville Slayer. This is the nickname given to an American serial killer who murdered at least 24 prostitutes and drug addicts, most of whom were women in New Orleans, like they said in the video, in the audio. Through the course of the investigation, 2 separate suspects were considered, one of whom was convicted of one murder, leading investigators to believe that there were multiple killers responsible for these at least 24 deaths. The perpetrators mainly targeted black girls or women, aged 17 to 42. Most of them were strangled to death, while a number of them were beaten or drowned in the canal or rivers, then dumped in the swamps, rivers, or canals near highways. Due to the isolated location of these dumping sites, the victims' bodies were left in water, spanning several weeks to several years. Obviously, this resulted in extreme decomposition of the body, and obviously, when that happens, you lose a lot of evidence, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Some of the victims have never been identified in this According to investigators, the crimes began in the summer of 1991 after a young black woman informed police about an attempt on her life. This is the first suspect that is mentioned here, and he actually mentioned him. Remember how he mentioned the black police officer in the New Orleans area? Well, this was the guy he's right. This was the first suspect of the case. Victor Gant. He's a native of New Orleans. Gant spent his childhood and youth in Algiers. Hopefully I'm saying that city right, where a number of the victims lived and were abducted from. He became a police officer in February of 1980, and while on patrol, Gant would spend a lot of times in the red light districts, where in later years he acquired many acquaintances. He acquainted himself with several sex workers, including pimps and street informants. In the early 1990s, he gained a reputation for being a corrupt police officer after a number of informants reported that he, along with a few others, were running racketeering. So he was actually helping pimps and other criminals do their crimes here. He was ordered to submit a DNA test to see whether he could match the perpetrator's saliva. Apparently, they found a piece of chewing tobacco near one of the victims' bodies. The results were inconclusive and no charges were filed against Gant. He was dismissed from the force in August of 1996. So he was dismissed about a year exactly before this call happened. There's a second suspect, Russell Elwood. Another resident of New Orleans, Russell Elwood soon came under police suspicion. He was a native of Ohio, but he moved to New Orleans in 1968 after graduating high school. For the next 30 years, he lived in quite a rocky lifestyle because of his drug addictions, so a very inconsistent, unsteady lifestyle. He had no permanent residence, never married, or he changed professions very often, mostly sticking to photography and cab driving. He was arrested several times between 1968 and 1998, repeatedly. He first came under police scrutiny in 1994 after he was allegedly found fondling himself in the back of his car. The police pulled up and they found this. He was parked in an area where two of the bodies were found of these crimes, so that would automatically raise suspicion. He was brought into the station and interrogated. On August 4th, 1997, he was arrested on drug charges. So it sounds like one of those things where, hey, he committed another crime, right? So they're going to hold him on that in the meantime. Okay, so yeah, he was released after he did his time for the drug charges. He was released and arrested several times after this, actually. Moving to and from New Orleans for the time being. Ultimately, he was arrested in January 1998 after a failure to appear on traffic violations. So they got him back in jail for that. While incarcerated March 4th, 1998, authorities charged him with the murders of 2 of the 24 victims that I mentioned earlier. The trial began on June 8th, 1999 in Lafayette. During the proceedings, a number of Elwood's former cellmates and then sex workers in the area testified as the witnesses for the prosecution, obviously, with the sex workers claiming with the cellmates claiming that he had confessed these murders to them in jail. He confessed to killing over 60 people while he was in jail. You know how that goes, though, so that alone was not enough. But the other witnesses, the workers, actually said that they spotted him with one of the victims prior to her being murdered. Multiple people did. Elwood himself denied knowing any of the victims and committing any murders, although he could not provide an alibi. One of the victims' mothers admitted that her daughter was a drug addict and a sex worker, but said that she had never seen Elwood with her daughter before. His attorneys argued that Elwood was not in New Orleans at the time of the murders, claiming that he had been in Ohio with some relatives. Elwood was known for keeping extensive amounts of documents that indicate his whereabouts and other miscellaneous things, but the receipts regarding his supposed presence in Ohio for February of 1993 had mysteriously disappeared. This became a huge ordeal. They blamed the task force, his attorneys did, the task force in charge of this investigation, and accused them of destroying all the evidence. Elwood's attorneys then filed a motion for a polygraph test to be performed on the lady that headed the task force. This was granted. She was tested a series of questions regarding the missing receipts, but the result was inconclusive. Ultimately, the murder charge for one of the victims was dropped, but Elwood was found guilty of the other victim, named Cheryl Lewis, and was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole on August 17th, 1999. He died in an Angola State Prison in 2014 in Louisiana. He was 63 years old at the time of his death. A lot of people are very suspicious of this and don't believe that he is the person that committed this. So let's go to the big thing as it relates to this story when we go back to what we just covered with the Howard Stern thing. The Howard Stern call happened on August 13th. They have him incarcerated on August 4th through that time. I haven't seen the documents myself, so this is hearsay and a lot of online reading where I've come up with this information. So don't take it with a grain of salt, I guess you could say. I think another thing that stuck out to me is I found his date he was born in 1951, so he would have been mid to late 40s, I believe, when he would have made this call to Howard Stern.
Right.
A lot of people are convinced this was the guy, and a lot of people are convinced this isn't the guy. But it doesn't seem like he could have made the call because he would have been in jail.
Yeah, this guy on the phone, it's hard to say because he's on the phone, obviously, but he sounded younger than that. This guy sounded like late 20s on the phone.
I kind of got that impression too. I mean, that's hard to say just by hearing somebody, right? But I did get that impression myself.
Yeah, like when I heard this guy's age you're talking about just now, I was like, man, this doesn't add up in terms of age, and that is concerning. Because also what he was saying, when he talked like a younger person would talk too, like the way he was bragging and everything.
Yeah.
It wasn't like how someone in their mid to late 40s would talk.
I can see what you're saying for sure. I mean, it's hard to say. Everybody's different. I think when you get in assumptions like that, it could be kind of bad. But nevertheless, I understand what you're saying. Just his psychology, if you had to analyze it, using psychology, it didn't seem like he was an older person. Maybe 30s. No, that's kind of the impression I got. It doesn't line up. Of course, many people think this is all a hoax, which the Howard Stern has been known to have some crazy callers call in, but I don't know necessarily if I feel as if it's a hoax in regards to that he was in on it. I don't know if Howard Stern would be in on it. The thing that stuck out to investigators about this call was the amount of information that he knew. And apparently this story wasn't very public. So the fact that he was able to share the information that he did was very alarming to them.
Yeah, it definitely seems like he had some privileged information, because every time they do any type of investigation, they don't release everything to the papers or news in general, so that if there was someone who comes forward with information, they know if they know things that, aren't released, they can, verify that this was not someone who just, came out of nowhere saying stuff they already should have known. And this makes sense to me that, there was some stuff there clearly that they hadn't released in the news and that they would be concerned about.
Let us, if you're listening live, let us know what you think. We'll get back to it here.
I really want to know what everyone thinks, if this guy sounded younger to them or not. To me, he definitely sounded younger. Younger than I am now, probably, like I said.
You're what, like 65 now?
No, but I'm not 40, and this guy definitely doesn't sound 40s. He sounded, like I said, he sounded like late 20s, early 30s to me.
So what? The technology obviously wasn't the same then.
Yeah.
And he's very adamant on the fact that he's been in this position before and he can't trace the call.
Mm-hmm.
Thought that was interesting. But the FBI apparently was there the next day. A task force has been formed already, and they got a lot of this.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into like tracing calls and stuff like that, and it is pretty much only owned by law enforcement. So, yeah, it would have been ridiculous to assume that he could. Yeah, he did a good job of getting information out of this guy, though, and both him and Robin did. And so I feel like they did their due diligence. If they wanted to help in any way, they did it. And obviously they didn't fight turning over their equipment and recordings. They complied. And so anyone that said that they could have done more is way off base. They did as much as they could.
What did you think about when they brought the psychologist in there at the end?
Yeah, it was interesting. I wish that the other person had interacted with them more, but I think they were clearly spooked by the idea of talking to the psychologist, because he was dragging information out like hard. He came on a little too strong, asking questions too hard.
Came right out with the wet the bed thing.
The bed and then the fires. And I think he was worried that he was going to give up information that would have accelerated things faster.
What about how this person always, I don't want to say always, frequently answered with sure?
So that speaks to me that his cocky nature, like he was just like, it was nonchalant. It was like, sure, whatever. Makes me think of a younger person.
You got a lot of people commenting here. Sounded younger than 40. They think, somebody else said that they think it's about a 50% chance that this is real, a 50-50 chance that this is real. I agree. It's a toss-up for me. I don't think Howard Stern was in on it.
Not at all.
Possible that this person's just full of shit. I mean, that's possible. It's possible that maybe they were in jail with this other guy. Who knows? They definitely have a lot of information, though. They didn't have, I guess, a crazy amount, but they talked about the hammer. They talked about some of the other things that were, I guess, intrigued law enforcement. A lot of people are asking, could he have called from jail possibly? Would they know back in 1997? Good question. I really don't know.
I don't know that he would have been able to be. I feel like he was on the phone too long for it to be a jail call, but I could be wrong. But you don't necessarily, from what I can gather, you don't have a long time on those jail calls before they tell you your time's up. It's usually like 5-10 minutes. This was almost a 20-minute call.
17 minutes he talked to this alleged serial killer.
Yeah, so I think that seems like it was a little long for a jail call. And also, I don't think anyone...
Somebody said, my dad was in jail once and called 911 from the jail phone to ask when he was going to be let out.
Well, there you go. So, I just don't know that anyone would risk it, but maybe that guy clearly risked it, by doing that.
I think there's like a certain like cocky factor to it, right? Like he is so proud of himself. He's just going to sit here and talk about it all day. He's trying to be careful. You can tell it seems like he's trying to be careful with what he's saying. He doesn't want to give too much, although I agree with you. I think Howard Stern and Robin did a great job of getting whatever information they could out of whatever the conversation was.
He started to clam up a bit there towards the end. I think he realized he was giving too much.
Yeah, well, the tattoo thing they got out of him, I mean, that was pretty telling. But it's also possible that he was just trying to mislead him, too.
Yeah.
That's a big thing, too, right? He was just trying to mislead them. A lot of people... Okay, what else? There's a lot of background noise in jail. Yeah, true. The audio recording itself is not great. I actually tried to clean it up a little bit. I think I did a pretty good job. But, yeah, I don't think he would make that 17-minute call in jail. I think that would get picked up. Yeah. So that leads to... That's a big question, right? So is he not... The person that was arrested... There's a couple different scenarios here. Is he not the killer? Or, like they stated in the beginning, they thought there were multiple killers.
Right, yeah, and it very well could be, because like seemed like there were a couple different ways these people were being killed. Some were being drowned, and that's how they died. Some were strangled, and some were beaten to death with a hammer or beaten to death. And he said he did strangle one person, but then he switched to using the hammer exclusively. He never mentioned drowning someone, and so maybe this other person was the guy who was drowning people. I don't know. But he also did say it took a long time before they found that first body. And that's why he didn't do like the whole clues thing that he wanted to do.
Someone proposed something interesting here. Maybe there were multiple people in on this together.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah. Of course, we'll never know, right?
Yeah.
That's the crazy part about this. You'll never know for sure. Everything I've read does not indicate there's any proof that was him that made the call or anybody else.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that's, I don't know, it almost has like a cult following, right? Like Howard Stern has a very big cult following, but this story itself does. People still talk about it to this day. A couple years ago, it actually got really popular again, but a lot of people digging into trying to find out who it was, and then the Storyville killer thing is primarily what the focus is on.
That's crazy. No, I did not know that was what your whole thing was going to be tonight. And when you started playing, I was like, man, this is the craziest thing we've ever talked about on here. Like, I thought the chimpanzee last week was nuts. This was crazier.
Travis the chimp.
Yeah.
Was this scary?
Well, it was weird. It was kind of upsetting because, like anything like this, you're potentially talking to pure evil. Hey, listening to this person talk is disgusting. Like if this is a real thing. And so, yeah, it was. I wouldn't say it was scary. It was just more like pure disgust at this person. The thought it could be the guy next door is pretty scary, though. Yeah. And then his, I feel like Howard's responses to this guy, he was like, well, you should probably go kill yourself. realistic responses to this because this
What
is
would you say? Yeah.
Well, I would obviously probably try, like he did try to get more information, try to get him to be caught. But yeah, I would, at some point, you kind of just get disgusted with things like that. And you will say something like that.
Somebody said Howard is pissed. Yeah, he was pissed. You could
Yeah,
tell he was, him and Robin were disgusted.
Yeah.
What a crazy story, man. I'm glad I could share that one. I know a lot of people have heard of it, but you really hadn't. So I think there's going to be a lot of people out there that haven't too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the first time I had ever heard of it. So that was definitely very interesting.
Yeah, it was good.
Jeff Townsend Media. CG, good night.
And the question is, do I stay here? Will you be back? Are you gonna come back? Will you be back? Are you coming back?